It is funny, on the one hand, the USA is one of the most aggressive tax countries you can find in the world. So as a citizen of the USA, you are basically taxed on basis of your citizenship. And this means that even if you are a non-resident of the USA and, for example, you live abroad as a digital nomad with your online business, for example, you will still be taxed in the United States. It is therefore all the more surprising that non-citizens and non-residents of the USA can set up a company in the USA and pay 0% tax, if done correctly, of course, specifically with a US LLC. And this is in fact a very common structure for online entrepreneurs who live globally. And now you might be wondering why you should choose this setup as an online entrepreneur or digital nomad. And believe me or not, but as aggressive as the US is in terms of taxes against its US citizens and residents, the more non-aggressive they are against non-US citizens and non-residents who do not reside inside the United States. Specifically, if you have an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company, but you as a member of the LLC do not operate the business out of the US, and so it is actually possible that you pay exactly 0% tax with the LLC. And that's why it makes an LLC such a popular choice for online entrepreneurs traveling or working globally. Of course, that all sounds super exciting and promising now. Yes, and it is, but there are a few things you need to bear in mind, of course, that you don't run into problems with the United States or other countries, especially when it comes to taxes. So definitely make sure to watch this video until the end, that you don't fall into any of these potential traps. But before we move on, we need to first understand what is a US LLC and how does this actually differ from a normal business structure. Well, generally speaking, the way it works is that a business is a separate legal entity from you as an owner. And this means that any legal liability and things like this that fall to the company are dealt at the company level and then cannot essentially go through this corporate structure and hurt you as the owner personally. And typically it is the case that companies are taxed at the corporate level on their profits. So there are basically special corporate tax rates that are applied for that income. And you as the owner of the business pay yourself a separate salary or a dividend, depending on how you decide to essentially pay yourself. And now in terms of the legal protection side, the LLC is exactly the same, broadly speaking, as any normal business structure, but where it differs now is how it is taxed. So specifically, the way the LLC can be taxed is that the LLC is not taxed as a corporation unless you elect to do this, of course. And generally, the LLC we are talking about is incorporated as a disregarded entity, and this means that it is not taxed separately. Instead, all of the profits of the company are automatically passed on to the members of the LLC, so essentially to the owners of the LLC. So the way you can think of this is that any profit that the LLC makes is paid out automatically to the owner. So let's say you are 2 members in the LLC, so each member has like 50% shares, and you make, let's say, I don't know, 100K profit. So 50K profit is automatically paid out in proportion to its owner. So each owner automatically gets these 50K US dollars. And generally, this structure is used by online entrepreneurs over something which is called a C corporation in the United States. And this is basically the more normal business structure in the United States. But for online entrepreneurs, it makes much more sense to set up the LLC as a disregarded entity instead of a C corporation. Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, it's a lot more simple to set up. Secondly, the accounting is a lot more simple. So it's just a cheaper business structure to operate. And it is thus better for smaller and leaner operations, basically. I mean, we could go over this in more detail, but the point here is not to compare it to, like the other business structures in the US. The point here is to talk about specifically why this LLC incorporated as a disregarded entity is so interesting for non-US residents. So people who basically don't live in the United States. So in general, it is fully possible for you to form a company wherever you want. So you can set up a company, in almost every country you can imagine. Let's say you want to set up a company in Spain, but the thing is how it normally works. If you set up a company in Spain, for example, the company will be taxed at company level with corporate tax. So basically you won't have any, let's say, tax advantages if you set up Spain company as a non-resident in Spain. You will still have to pay corporate tax at company level. If you pay yourself a salary or your dividend, you will still have to pay yourself personal income taxes or taxes on these dividends. So it basically, does not give you any advantages to set up a company in Spain, for example. So generally speaking, the benefit of a US LLC is that if you are a non-US resident, that US LLC will not be taxed in the US if you form it as a pass-through entity. I mean, I mentioned it before, also called a disregarded entity. It's essentially going to have 0% tax in the US, of course, if certain criteria are met. But note, this is 0% US tax, so it basically doesn't mean that you have no tax anywhere, but we will get back to this in a moment. So there are a couple of conditions for this to not be taxed in the United States. If you read about this in the actual law, for example, of the US business law, what it will say is that people who are not living in the United States are taxed on business income only if that business is engaged in a trade or business in the United States. So now the question is, when is this triggered? First of all, if you have a dependent agent in the US, so this can be any employee that is regularly working as a contractor, so actually people who are physically working in the United States while working for your US LLC. The other case is if you operate in the US through this company through a permanent establishment. So what does this mean? For example, if you spend enough time in the United States where the IRS can essentially claim that there is a permanent place of business within the US, and then your business is essentially going to be taxed there. So if neither of these cases are met, that means that the US will not tax this LLC because it's, basically a non-resident LLC. But, and now I come back to the point I made earlier, just because you are not taxed in the US doesn't mean that you can't be taxed in any other country, of course. So for example, you cannot simply operate a US LLC from Spain and then think Spain will not tax the LLC. The way companies are generally taxed is based on where they are a resident, or with other words, where they operate, and not necessarily based on where they are registered. So usually how it works, a company is taxed where it is registered. So let's say you incorporate a company in the UAE. This UAE company is always going to be taxed in the UAE. But if you manage or operate this company also from, let's say, Spain, Spain is also going to tax that company as a Spain resident company. And here comes basically the big advantage of a US LLC. So you don't have to deal with the US taxes at all. You can simply focus on the tax rules of the country where you actually reside. And now it is the case in most countries that you will not become a tax resident if you do not stay there for more than 6 months per year. So let's say you live, for example, 5 months per year in Spain, the other 5 months in Portugal, and let's say the rest of the year you travel, for example. This is how you will not trigger a tax resident or permanent establishment in any of these countries, because you don't stay for more than 6 months in any of these countries. Now there are also countries with a so-called territorial tax system, and this means basically that foreign income is tax-free, so 100% tax-free. And you also have countries with certain tax regimes, such as the Beckham law in Spain, for example, where foreign income is also tax-free for 6 years. So what do I want to say? I want to say with the right setup, it's possible to pay absolutely 0% tax. Another major advantage of the US LLC is a business infrastructure. First of all, the LLC has a very, very good reputation worldwide. In addition, you have access to many fintech banking options. So there are really plenty of options, and the huge banking landscape in the USA. So even as a non-resident of the USA, you can open accounts at top tier banks such as Chase, Citi, Bank of America, and many more. The LLC also has an excellent reputation with payment processors, so you can easily open an account with Stripe, for example, without any problems. For example, let's say you are an online coach and you want to sell your course via Stripe through a UAE company. Then it can quickly happen that the customer's credit card provider rejects a payment via Stripe. Why? Because there is a Dubai company behind it, and this Dubai company still has a worse reputation than a US LLC. And overall, it simply just looks better to have a US business. So most people, especially if you are selling to somewhere in the West, perceptions matter. If people from the West see that they are buying from a company in, let's say, some Asian country, they might still buy your product or service, but they are going to have a few second thoughts. And overall, in the big picture, that is going to lead to some people to literally refuse to buy because they just don't trust your company. But if you have a US company, most people are going to trust the US company. Why? Because let's be honest, most of the things we buy all the time anyway are from US companies already. And that, along with the tax advantages, is the main reason why so many people around the world, so many especially online entrepreneurs, choose this structure. So I hope that video was useful to you. Maybe it gave some food for thought. Maybe it gave you something to think about whether something like this, so something like a US LLC, might be useful for your business. In case you have any questions, feel free to ask us personally. You can simply click on the first link in the description. With that said, see you in the next one. Bye.